Hey, today I'm talking about 3 Christopher Abbott films, and the names of those 3 movies are Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, Entergalactic, and A Most Violent Year. First up is Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. This is a 2016 film starring Tina Fey and is based off a book, which is a memoir written by a war correspondent's time while she was in Afghanistan during the early to mid 2000s. I remember when this came out and I was kind of confused with like what the tone of this was because it seemed kind of serious, but it also seemed kind of goofy, and I'm like, what is this about? And it got like okay reviews, so I didn't bother to watch it. And I will say that it does have some tonal issues, but despite that, it's a really great film. It's really just like in the beginning, it kind of struggles with like balancing the humor with the serious nature of what they're going on about. But as the film like kind of gets its footing, it strikes a really good balance of moments of levity. There's also very serious subject matter here. Like they especially talk about like what is the reporter's role in a war-torn environment, because like they need to be truthful and honest about like the stories they cover, but they also are trying to get on the news, because just because they make a story doesn't mean that it's going to go on air. And they need to also be very intentional and mindful of not putting themselves or others in danger just for the sake of getting a story. I think those are all really, really great, interesting questions and ideas, and I think everyone gave a great performance. Tina Fey was a very solid lead. Christopher Abbott was almost unrecognizable in his big bushy beard. There's a ton of other actors in here that you'd recognize and love. I think the ideas they come up with are really great. So yeah, I would totally recommend this movie. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I definitely think it's worth a watch. You may notice kind of some of the tonal issues, but whether or not you do, you'll fly right past them and get to the good stuff. So yes, thoroughly enjoyed, definitely recommend. Next up is Entergalactic. This is a 2022 Netflix movie. It could be described as a visual companion to one of Kid Cudi's most recent albums, but it's not like a musical or anything like that. It's an animated love story, really. Like there is Kid Cudi music in it, but like no one sings or anything. So yeah, the basic premise is there are these 2 artists who are like on the brink of kind of exploding in their career, but also at that same time they discover each other and have feelings for one another, and they're just trying to navigate all of the emotional complexity of like, my career's about to take off, but also I think you're really hot. What are we gonna do with all of these things? And I think the story is really great. They also go into stuff with like one of his exes pops up in this, and I can really relate to like, you know, wanting to have that ex still in your life, but then just like the emotional complexity of that, because like maybe the other person still wants something, but you don't want to like go all that way because you've been past there, but you still want to meet them a little bit of the ways, you know, have that emotional connection with them still, and just like how easy it would be to just like fall back into line with them. And that's like its whole thing. Yeah, no, it's a really good, really interesting story, and it's got really beautiful animation in regards of like, it really looks like the stylized stuff from like Into the Spider-Verse, and it's definitely gorgeous at times. But that's also where I have to criticize the movie, because for some reason they decided to not do 24 frames a second all the time. Most of the time it's like 2 frames a second, and it looks so weird and so cheap. I thought something was wrong with my computer, but no, that's just how the movie's supposed to look, and it does not look good. If it was an artistic choice, it was a bad choice. If it was a financial choice, they should have just got more money and done more frames, because it's so distracting. Like, I enjoyed this movie despite that. Also, Timothée Chalamet is in this, and he's just great. He's like this little thug who's ridiculous, and I just love it. Anyway, so yeah, no, I did enjoy this movie a good solid amount. It's a quite like, so it's basically a 4 out of 5. I would honestly recommend it, though I would do it cautiously just because like the frame rate stuff is so distracting. So if you think you can power through the distracting frame rate, I definitely think it's well worth a watch. And lastly is A Most Violent Year. This is a 2015 film starring Oscar Isaac and Jessica Chastain. Christopher Abbott plays like a thug. He's barely in the movie, but he is great in his little part. Anyway, the basic premise is it is the 1980s, and Oscar Isaac is in the oil business in New York City, and he really doesn't want to be a mobster, but everything in his life is pointing to him needing to be a mobster in order to be successful. So he's having lots of issues morally. And I definitely like the story a lot. I think it's it's a very interesting story of like that struggle of trying to walk the line of being successful in a shady business without being shady for the most part. That's intriguing. Oscar Isaac definitely gave a great performance, though I would criticize it because I've seen him do the same sort of thing in several movies and he's not really adding anything new here. So even though it is a good performance, if this is your first Oscar Isaac film, fantastic. But if it's not, you've seen him do this before, so you're not going to be too surprised by him. Also, like, the title of the film is A Most Violent Year, and like, yeah, there's some violence in the film, but I would not call this a violent film. There are some intense scenes, but like, barely. Also, like, it's definitely a mobster film, but it feels like there's some mobster aspects of the genre that are just not here, and so it makes the film feel almost hollow at times, which is a bit unfortunate. That being said though, I still enjoy it. It's a 4 out of 5. And I would still recommend it. It's just like, if you're well versed in Oscar Isaac or mobster films, it's not gonna break the mold, but it's still an entertainment film that is worth a watch. Alrighty, now for today's rankings. First up, we got Whiskey Tango Foxtrot at number 15 in the really like section. And then after that is Entergalactic sitting number 25 in the quite like section. And then bringing up the rear, not too terribly far behind, is A Most Violent Year sitting number 29, also in the quite like section. This is a total of 48 old movies so far this year.